I'll send you the link, Doc, just in case you want to share with your, uh, on your Facebook
Okay.
page or Facebook personal Facebook account. So we're live now. We're just gonna get the link from our streaming. I'll send you the link, Doc, on our private chat here. Yan. All right. Okay. For those of you who are watching this, please do share the streaming to your friends. It's going to be an interesting discussion with Doc Beverly of DOH. If you have any questions, make sure to post it here so we can read them for her. Okay, we're ready. Let's do this.
Okay.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Istoryang Futbolero. My name is Ron Poblete. With me, back after a long absence, Mikel Paris of Anti Ants is here. Mikel, welcome back,
Good
bro.
evening. Thanks for not removing me from the intro segment there dun sa video. Salamat.
Grabe ka naman. Alam ko, Mikel, medyo busy ka lately kasi, you're trying to catch up with sales and then you're taking care of business and also your employees. So medyo you
Yes.
didn't have time for us sa Istoryang Futbolero kahit na nagtatampo na kami sa'yo. Okay lang. Buti na lang si Doc Beverly, our special guest for tonight. Please welcome Dr. Beverly Ho of DOH. Doc Bevs, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Ron. Good evening, Mikal. Thank you for having me.
Evening, Doc.
Yours anytime, Doc Bebs. Alam mo naman, yun si Mikel, hindi yan magpapakita dito kung wala ka dito. Kaya ano rin eh.
Actually, nabalitaan ko ron, wala na masyadong viewers, so sabi ko, balik na lang muna ako. Kawawa. The jokes. So, sorry, I've been so busy, guys, kasi nga, with business, and talaga it's really hard times for everybody, so I've been focusing on that. So, but when I found out Doc Bev, dapat last week pa si Doc Bev, di ba? That's, sabi ko, I'll find time for this because I really have some pressing questions, not just from me, but from people I know, mga stakeholders about the vaccines and syempre COVID. And the last time we spoke to Doc Bev, I learned so much. I was very assured. So I'm very glad that she's here tonight and she can answer our questions, especially from idiots like us. If anybody out there, the viewers, if you have any good questions, please send lang sa amin sa comments that we can also ask Doc Bev. I'm sure she'll be happy to help.
Yes. Alam mo, Doc Bebs, nagpapasalamat kami na nandito ka kasi for the past few weeks, we've been, getting questions about the vaccine, and we've read some of the posts of Dr. Salvana as well, and he's been consistently telling people, reminding people to stop sharing fake news on the vaccines. Kasi merong yung ibang tao kasi pag nakakatakot yung balita, ay madali nilang ikalat sa kanilang mga kaibigan. Lalong-lalo na yung kanilang mga yung kanilang yung kanilang interpretation of how the government is implementing the vaccine program. At not only that, meron pa silang mga conspiracy theories on the vaccine. So, kung ano-ano nilang lumalabas na kwento at hindi siya nakakabuti, of course, sa karamihan sa ating mga kababayan. Mikel with the test, he did a survey. By the way, Doc Beb, si Mikel, nag-survey siya sa anti-ants, sa kanyang mga employees. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mikel, you said around 70% of your employees are not,
Yes.
they're not, they don't want to take the vaccine because they're not sure
Yes.
about the
Yes. So,
vaccine.
yeah. So just a quick background lang, Doc, because I was one of those guys who's been doing a lot of research and worried about vaccines and been hearing all these complaints from people na, oh, the Philippines is so slow in getting vaccines. Yan, ang dami reklamo, di ba? And my parents, they live in London, and I know the situation there with the vaccines. I have relatives who've had it abroad. But anyway, so for our company, because we have 400 employees, I was able to, work with people, and we're hoping to get the vaccines. But I wanted to talk to our team because we've been doing a lot of education stuff with them na touch wood until today wala kaming kahit isang COVID patient na employee na team member. And that's because of the constant information we've been giving them. But I've been hearing a lot of people, other companies in other places saying na parang a lot of people don't want the vaccine. So I went from this stage na I thought we wouldn't have enough vaccines in the Philippines to now I'm worried baka dadating lahat ng vaccine walang gustong kumuha. So just as a way, because I said in our company we'll do an information campaign with our doctor because we have a doctor that we hired, a good friend of ours. And I said that I want people to freely decide on the vaccine, but I want them to do it with good information behind it, not just some Facebook video or what. So anyway, we did the first phase of that is a survey. And yung survey namin is currently 73% said they don't want the vaccine, even if we gave it like readily available. And that to me was alarming. So I also asked a few friends. And the thing is, a lot of them also had the same situation in their companies. Na madaming ayaw magpa-vaccine. And I'm shocked. So, but in our survey, we also asked them, okay, if kung ayaw nyo, bakit? So give us some feedback. So we're collating all of that. And we're trying to get some information. But yun nga, nakakatakot, Doc, because a lot of people are saying they don't want the vaccine. So I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on that, and what can we do to help with this situation? Because me personally, to all the viewers out there, I'm volunteering as a tribute. I want, kung may vaccine, pwede na ako, unahin na ako, okay lang ako. Kasi ang dami ko na namang side effects, okay lang.
Sigurado yan, Doc. Magpapatunok sa'yo si Mikel.
Game kahit saan. But yeah, so there, Doc. That's my worry. There's a lot of people who don't want to get the vaccine.
So yeah, Doc Bev, so we want to hear from you regarding this. What's your take on it?
I think parang it's not a secret to the entire world that we really had challenges the last few years, no, particularly because of a vaccine that was introduced not in a really positive way. Am I coming in clear?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Kanina chat medyo okay na konti.
Okay. And then, so what we did was early on, I think around September, we actually ran a survey, that sampled really pretty fairly across the country. And so the main learning there was at that time, mga 60+% agrees to be vaccinated. But the unique parang insight there was that when you ask people why they would have themselves vaccinated, parang the driver is the efficacy of the vaccine. But why they wouldn't want to be vaccinated, the driver is actually safety issues, no? So fast forward to like December, syempre, diba, naglabasa na yung mga surveys and stuff. And then we also ran ours. It's clear to us that this isn't like vaccines before, di ba? Na parang 40 years may history ka na, of 40 years na ginagamit yung vaccines for babies, di ba? Ito parang every step of the way, a lot of people think it was rushed, but perhaps from a scientific point of view or R&D point of view, yung kailangan natin iklaro sa mga tao is, isipin na lang natin, the whole world, all hands on deck, di ba? Kasi parang before, it's sequential. Like you finish this, you look for funding, then you go to this, and then this one, and then this one. Ito, parang, biro mo, some wealthy governments, nagtaya sila ng pera, di ba? They gave billions of dollars without an assurance na merong maiimbento, no? So parang, to a certain extent, that was the driver for such a fast paced approval. But then again, the question now is, are people getting the info? No? So, sino yung unang types of people who were expecting na gonna be championing this? Sa umpisa pa lang, no? I mean, we cannot expect it's the regular mamamayan. But at the very least sa amin, who has to be championing this? It's healthcare workers, diba? People who have studied this, who have studied even how this all works, etc. Pero surprisingly, no, when we did our surveys with them, 60%, that's not high, diba? For a group that supposed to be our field is, we live and breathe science, diba? So what we tried to do was we recognized then na hindi na to parang a lot of people kasi are expecting, oh, DOH, magkaroon kayo ng, commercial, TV commercial, etc. No? It's as if that's actually the way to go. But I think what is clear to us is that now people need a platform for two-way feedback, di ba? Hindi siya yung parang magpabakuna ka, yun na. And dadaanin ko yan lahat sa graphics. Hindi di ba? It's too close to home for you to just get a movie star and then the movie star will endorse, di ba? Hindi na ganon. So, klaro din po sa amin na the DOH, kahit tayo lahat sa government mag-endorse, we're not going to be enough to work with every community or every group, kahit siguro company lang ni Mikel, di ba? So, it has to be some healthcare worker, maybe not a doctor, a nurse, etc., who will have to champion it all over the country. And so I guess that's what we did in the first so from December until the entire January, is to do these town halls, no, with the healthcare workers mismo. So good naman kasi we did pre and post, no? So bago mag-town hall, nag-survey kami, tapos parang, okay, 60 plus. After the town hall, na-explain ng mga experts natin, maabot ng 95%, diba? Meron kami sa midwives, 47%, tumaas to halos 80%, still not high enough, but all it's telling us is that people perhaps because of all the noise, they needed an information that's synthesized. And we are just talking about health workers. Now, how do we see the campaign moving forward? It's really that local governments, companies, public or private, will organize a lot of these avenues for us to communicate, for them to tap healthcare workers all over the country to get them to speak to smaller communities, diba? Hindi to madadaan sa mass media lang lahat, no? But really a lot of smaller, I guess, town halls, meetings, whatever. And that's really where we're seeing this is gonna go. Kasi the last thing na gusto mo mangyari is nag-full blast ka ng info, tapos yung tao may tanong siya, magtatanong siya sa barangay health worker niya, magtatanong siya dun sa doctor niya, tapos ang sagot nila is, actually, hindi ko rin alam, di rin ako sure. I mean, that's really gonna be like so bad, diba?
Yeah.
So, sorry ang haba ng sagot ko, pero...
No, that's perfect. That's
That's really where we are now.
It's good. Para meron tayong konting overview of what's been happening with the DOH and the campaign on vaccination. Kasi it's very important that people understand where we are at this very moment in time. Kasi syempre merong iba na hindi naman sila ganun ka-exposed sa information drive ng DOH at lahat nakukuha lang nila yung impormasyon sa kanilang mga kaibigan. Maganda somebody from DOH mismo ang magsasabi ngayong gabi na ito ngayon nandito po tayo. Doc Bevs, first of all, congratulations on the Bida ang May Disiplina drive, the Bida campaign. I think karamihan naman ng ating mga Pilipino ngayon kahit sa nung dako ng Pilipinas ay nagsusuot ng mask, nagsusuot ng face shield na they keep distance. Meron pa rin mga pasaway kahit na hindi natin maiiwasan yan, pero generally speaking, Doc Bevs, okay naman yung kampanya yata ng DOH kasi lahat naman, I think, meron ba tayong numbers dyan, Doc? How many percent ng ating population ngayon ang sumusunod sa ating minimum health standards na sinimula ng DOH?
I think yung mga self-reported numbers natin talagang matataas, no? Nasa higher than 85%. What we're trying to do now is to have third-party assessment, no? So meron tayong pinapilot na tool ngayon kasama yung Joint Task Force COVID Shield under USEC Malaya. So basically every month meron pong members of the fire protection or the police, they're wearing plain clothes and they go to a few areas where we have marked as high traffic, no? So that could be churches or groceries or the plaza. Tapos may tools sila ngayon, titingnan nila, okay, ilan yung nakamask, etc. Kasi syempre yung self-report, lahat naman tayo, sasabihin natin, ay, nagmamask ako palagi, nagganon ako, no?
Yeah.
Pero ito is a different way to monitor. And hopefully, we got the first round of data already for last month. It's being analyzed, so I still don't have the details. But we're hoping that this should be the more accurate picture of whether people are continuously doing it or not.
Before we hopefully, Doc, we get the information or the data on that. But right now, Doc, can you give us like a quick parang update on the cases? Marami pa tumaas ba, bumaba? Kamusta na yung ating yung COVID cases natin so far?
I think it's relative to what period you want to compare us to, di ba? So, syempre, kapag kinompare natin ng early December, our cases are actually higher, no? Now, so we're around 1,800, 2,000 already. But then you'll also see that Manila mismo, syempre, siguro most of your listeners are from Metro Manila, actually fairly controlled tayo, di ba? And I think that's actually pat on the back to everyone who has been doing their part. No? Pero nakikita din natin na talagang yung nagtitrigger ng spike sa atin are travel, di ba? So, yun talaga. So, kaya I think this is a time to tell everyone na meron po talagang dahilan, no, kung bakit kailangan seryosohin yung quarantine, especially those who are arriving from abroad. Before, people didn't want to do 14-day quarantine. Maraming, against talaga doon. No? So, we did testing on the first day, and then if people are negative, they go home. No? But we know that there are really risks that comes with that. And so now, because of the variant and all, we had to extend, and we test on the 5th day. Still, a lot of people are asking, can I be excused, etc. The answer is really no, because sabi nga nila, no, when you talk about mutation, it's like people running, at pag tumatakbo ka ng sobrang bilis, yung chance mo na madapa, mas malaki, no? So parang ganun din yun, no, yung sa pag-mutate ng mga viruses, di ba? Basically, you don't want the transmission to go so fast because that will lead to more mutation. And so we have to be very responsible, especially in bringing outside, no, say tourists, etc., coming over or balikbayan, but really using our quarantine mechanisms for that. So 5th day test, tapos after nun, kailangan magtuloy ng home quarantine, no, bago lumabas. At yung mga recent na kaso natin ng variant sa Pilipinas, kung you follow it, kitang-kita, no, may breach talaga in protocols na nangyari. Nag-mass gathering sila, hindi talaga sila minimum public health standards. So if nagawa lang yon, actually, hindi tayo dapat in this situation.
So, Doc, may effect na talaga yung translasyon na event sa Maynila. Nagkaroon ba talaga ng tumaas ba yung cases because of these events? Like translasyon, yung mga mass gatherings na yon, meron ba tayong data na lumabas na merong correlation dun sa mga events na to?
May preliminary analysis, no? So parang may statistically significant increase after that period. Pero siguro for gross, tingnan mo lang yung number, hindi mo masyadong nakikita, no? Kasi parang fairly stable pa rin naman yung numbers natin.
Okay. Yeah, Mika?
You touched upon the travel and the quarantine stuff, no? And I think, Doc, it's safe to say that until now, there's still a lot of questions from people who, like even me sa the daily groups namin or WhatsApp groups or whatever, people always ask me, like, my helper went on vacation, she's coming back, what should we do, what are the protocols? So it's really clear to me that even all this time na, parang there's still a lot of confusion. They don't really know what to do, and we end up giving advice, kami ganito, but it's not the same for everybody. And this is why I see there are mga breaches like that na may somebody comes home. Kasi especially now, like with helpers, people, they have to go home to their provinces. Diba? Like me, we're super strict when they come back. There should be quarantines and we even test. No? But it's just I noticed that there's still a lot of misinformation out there or uncertainty, and this is from people who are like very educated or big bosses of companies, but even them are not sure. So that's why I can see sometimes. I mean, although may mga saraul lang talaga na pasaway na they just don't want to follow. I think it's also a lot of people are not as educated as they should be on the protocols. Maybe because it also keeps changing. I don't know. Diba? Even the testing and all of that. And so I mean, for example, I'll ask it na lang straight. If let's say a friend of mine or a helper goes on vacation and they come back, what would be your suggested protocol to ensure safe as possible return?
So, syempre, in any instance no, na hindi mo same household, di ba? The ideal is whether they came from a north, south, etc. Is that for us, for me, it will be to quarantine, di ba? For 14
And that's
days.
14 days, full 14 days quarantine.
Yes, di ba? So even if you don't test, that's really the top, di ba? But if you want to test, you feel like, okay, kailangan ko na talaga. So we suggest, no, day 5 is safest, di ba? Kasi pag day 1, maybe too early, di ba? Wala pang symptom. Kasi kung may symptom siya, dapat lumabas na yun by day 3, day 4, di ba? So, day 5 to test, okay, you get the results again. So, kung okay na siya, best case pa rin is tuloy lang quarantine. Pero kung hindi, at least day 5, okay ka na, di ba? So, nag-test. So, I think yun yung parang 2 options lang. Pero I understand why you're saying na it gets complicated. Because, since the start of the pandemic, each LGU, receiving LGU, has a different rule. And I think now DILG is really recognizing this issue kasi it's also one of the biggest challenges why we couldn't parang improve local tourism din, di ba? During this pandemic. Kasi kailangan natin siya, no? To bring the economy back. At nahirapan kasi paano ka naman makaka-travel easily? Iba-iba yung rules, no? Sa iba-ibang LGU. So there's actually an effort now to harmonize the rules. Kasi before, di ba, each LGU, yung iba mas gusto maging strict, yung iba hindi. So I think my initiative now, hopefully before February ends, that actually happens. So standard, one rule lang across all LGUs.
Okay,
Well, Doc, I've been saying that for a while, even before. Each LGU has different implementations. Each LGU has a different track and tracing app. Instead of everybody on stay safe, may iba-iba. So it's really the mixed messages. An example lang, like for our helper, she wanted to go home to Bacolod. And throughout this time, she didn't go anywhere. She was quarantined here in our house kasi sobrang praning kami, we don't leave. But the funny thing is, I kept laughing with her, I kept joking with her. I said, you've been safe this whole time. The only time you're unsafe is all the time that you have to travel to the LGU to get your requirements to be able to travel. So you've been safe this whole time. Now, so when she started going to kasi dami munisipyo, dami certificate police, dami requirements, mas kinabahan na kami. Sabi ko, we have to be careful. Doon, pinarantine na nga natin siya nung nag-a-apply pa lang siya. Kasi parang we had a protected bubble and she had to go. And she was explaining that it was such a hassle because she had to go back several times. They didn't know what they were supposed to do in the LGU. So I can see this happening on multiple levels. Kaya I'm glad that you're saying sana finally ma-harmonize na kasi sobrang important yan. One-stop shop, everybody should have the same procedures, no, to follow. It just makes it much even when you go into the mall, it's the stay safe, but then there's still so many other places, iba din yung app, iba din yung nakaka-lose interest din sometimes.
Tsaka Doc, pick up on what Mikel is saying, at saka yung sinabi mo about opening our country to tourism. Kahit na local tourism natin, we were encouraging people to actually travel, right? Kaso may mga iba, they're worried kasi syempre maraming proseso bago payagang mag-travel sa ibang probinsya. And meron pang mga cases, Doc Bebs, I don't know how true this is, but may iba daw, kagaya daw sa Boracay, hindi ko alam kung rumor, meron daw ibang turista na pumunta doon, fake daw yung kanilang mga tests na results. May mga ganun mga cases, tapos yung pala may COVID positive daw sila. Hindi pa to confirm, but I heard that meron mga ganun na mga ibang kababayan natin na nagte-take advantage na may mga loopholes sa ating testing. And are we also expecting, kasi nakita ko rin Doc Bevs, maganda yung bagong commercial na ng DOT, ng Department of Tourism, encouraging people to travel in the time of itong tinatawag natin new normal. Have you seen the commercial, Doc, ng DOT?
No, not yet.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's funny. The new normal daw, going on vacation in the new normal. And it's ano talaga, medyo comedy yung approach nila, yung treatment nila dun sa commercial. And I read the comments, some of them were saying, totoo ba to? Kailangan mo bang mag-mask habang naglalaro ng volleyball sa beach? Mga ganun. So maraming, alam mo naman ng Pilipino, may pintas pa rin kahit na positive yung mensahe ng commercial. Meron pa rin mga cynical about it na ang hirap nga magpa-swab test. Tapos, how long will it take for me to actually schedule this? And then, going back to what I said, Doc Bebs, may mga ibang ating mga kababayan na hindi rin maayos ang ginagawa at tinatry nila i-circumvent itong mga loopholes natin sa mga rules ng certain places that we can travel to. So Doc, you being part of the IATF, of course, we want tourism to come back to where it was, or at least at certain level where people can earn money again. What are we doing about it right now? I mean, is there really a stand from government to sort of like get to that sweet spot where we are safe at the same time we're bringing back the economy by starting with our tourism industry?
I think I'm not in the best position to answer that. I just saw Sec Berna on the TV interview the other day, and she was saying that most of the tourism revenues, I think 80 to 90% really comes from domestic tourism. So that's actually good news for us. If we're really able to revive local tourism, then that would actually be a big help for everyone, no, in terms of the economy. So clear naman. So I think all the big bottlenecks for local tourism to flourish, they're addressing it. And syempre, a lot of it is really with di lang parang the varying rules of the LGUs, but also, I guess, openness of some LGUs to really open up na rin, no? Kasi marami din talagang takot pa rin, and they'd prefer to err on the side of caution. Hence, like, sige, wag na lang, di ba? So I think part of DOT's parang big task is really also to go around and reassure the LCEs that there's actually a protocol, we can help, we can work together and really make this happen. Na hindi lang naman sila lang yung mahihirapan. And then there's also several efforts to work with some government hospitals to subsidize the RT-PCR test, di ba? And like in PGH now, you can, I think, get the test at less than 1,000 pesos because DOT subsidizes the test. And after a day, you can get it now. It's so easy to book sa PGH.
And Doc, diba, they're now accepting also the saliva PCR. I think I saw today also like airlines are saying that you can already use the saliva PCR test as for your travel, and that's a cheaper option also, diba, the saliva PCR. Because sometimes people say, oh, mahal na. But really, the argument is if you're gonna travel, if you have money to travel, if you really, really want to go, and then the requirement is, let's say, a 3,000 or 4,000 pesos test, I'm sure that you can find a way to pay for that. Especially if you know it's going to be useful and helpful. No? And also the test results now, like Doc said, are fairly quick. Even us, when we test people next day, sometimes even end of day, you already get the results. So I'm very, very impressed that, I mean, we've caught up in that side na dati. Tagal mong hintay, yung uncertainty, di ba? So there, good job to everybody involved in that. But I think, Doc, like going back now lang just to vaccines, because I know this is what you wanted really to talk about. There's just so many different vaccines. There's so many, there's every day there's a news about this one, efficacy. I really feel bad for Doc Edsel na kasi every day na lang siya nag-explain ng 10,000 times. But could you just maybe brief us a bit more on what's the phasing now? What's happening? Because I know there's going to be some first round of vaccines this month. Which ones are coming, and just for further education for our viewers, because there's a lot of questions now in the comments about all the different types of vaccine, I think.
Okay, thank you. So we know that the country is procuring 7 or planning to procure 7 different brands of vaccine. And that's largely because to make stocks available for 110 million Filipinos, that's like around 220 million doses, di ba? No single company can already provide that to us. Bakit? No? Because the high-income countries have actually used up or have reserved the 80% of the global supply, diba? So claro, no single company can supply for all of us. That's why we're doing a portfolio approach. So part of those different vaccines that we might be buying, so there's Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, Gamaleya, Janssen, I think. Yeah, no. So at least may 7 na tayo, and that's where Sec Charlie is negotiating with. Now, the question for many of you is, paano ba nag-arrive dun sa 7, no? So we did have an expert panel, a vaccine expert panel that looked at, the existing clinical trial data for the 7 and said whether acceptable sila, no? Acceptable yung safety profile nila. So yes, no, granted. Pero klaro po din, no, kay Sec Charlie, sa team na nag-negotiate, this is a preliminary review, di ba? Because it's not just all about that vial. You also need to check the processes that are required, no, to get that vial from the manufacturer to your arm, di ba? And that means, like, do you have all the infrastructure that's needed? What cold storage will it require? Blah, 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 di ba? So, dahil doon, kahit may 7 tayo, hindi bibilhin yung actual vaccines if hindi pumasa yung 7 to have an EUA. No? So, it's there on the list, but if it ends up not getting an emergency use authorization, don't worry, no? Hindi siya bibilhin, di ba? Then another point there is that there's actually 5 different expert groups who helps us assess and reassess the types of vaccines that come into the country. Plus, syempre, you also have references, no? How ang tawag namin doon ay regulatory reliance or recognition, di ba? Ibig sabihin, there are ways to streamline things when a certain product has already been recognized by a stringent regulatory authority, diba? So that would be like your US FDA or UK or the European Union. So alam mo na kasi dumaan sila dun sa mga strict, diba? So anong mangyari, no? This month, so I think important then to let everyone know or emphasize that we are also part of the COVAX facility. So the COVAX facility is like WHO-led group. Parang isipin nyo na lang na mega purchaser siya ng buong mundo. And its goal is to make sure that the poorest 20% or at least the bottom 20% will not be able to get the vaccines, di ba? Kasi all the rich countries are buying it na. So, kung nag-panic buy lahat, dapat may maiwan para sa iba. So, they committed na for all of the countries, 20% of the population bibilhan nila. No? So, tayo, kung 100 million people, halos 20 million doses bibigay nila sa atin. So, it's a portfolio din sila. So, we're swerte din na this month, yung dadating would be the Pfizer vaccine. No? I think 118,000, 120,000 doses. So that would be good for like 58 to 60,000 people. Kasi 2 doses per person.
Doc, question about that. Actually, one of our friends who also play football with us asked me earlier today, medyo advanced ngayon yung kanyang question sa'yo. Ang tanong niya is, sabi niya, is there an estimate of the number of people for each segment? Total population is roughly 110 million. Wonder when the C, I guess yung C demographic na he's referring to here, would possibly have their shot. So, meron ba tayong schedule? Siyempre, unahin natin yung ating frontliners, and then we have also the vulnerable sector, yung ating mga senior citizens. But how about the ones who are in the working class? meron bang schedule for them as well? Will this be something? Will they be paying for their vaccines as well? Ano yung mga many things scenarios na mangyayari in the next few months once we roll out the vaccines?
So the overall direction is vaccines should be free. So even if the LGUs or the private companies bought the vaccines, the assumption was that they were going to give the vaccines for free to their employees. I think, no? Yun yung usapan, no? So, free siya, dapat. Question now is when, no? When are you getting the stocks? So, the original projection was it was going to be around May, diba? The first batch will arrive in May. Pero ngayon, mas maaga siya, no? So, nagkataon February. And then, the stocks that the LGUs and the private sector bought, originally, yung usapan din, it's to arrive in the third quarter, diba? So, that's really what we know now, and it's indicative. Everything actually is indicative. That's the weirdest part or most difficult part in this entire planning, because as you would also see in the news, even the European countries, they're not getting their deliveries on time, diba? So we are really just like, hoping that baka iba yung production lines nang pupunta dito sa Asia nang versus pupunta sa Europe, diba? So they're able to follow through with their promises sa atin, no? So next, you've seen the prioritization list. So sabi mo nga, the first two groups are medical frontliners and senior citizens. So wala po geographic, no? Walang pipiliing geography para sa both groups na yon. Ibig sabihin, as the vaccines come starting February, March, kailangan matapos sila wherever they are in the country. Pero because the stocks come in trickles then, di ba, pa konti-konti, may prioritization within the band, no? So, kunwari, for healthcare workers, you need to inject first those who are more exposed, meaning those who are likely in areas na mas maraming cases, di ba? Or those who are, say, they're all in the same hospital, pero some of them actually nag-work from home lang, diba? Some of the psychiatrists are doing teleconsultation. They really don't, diba? Or dermatologists. So, mauuna yung healthcare worker who are babad, no? Still in the ICU, etc., diba? Kasi they're more exposed. In any case, we finish all of the healthcare workers wherever you are in the country. NCR, Batanes, wherever, diba? Then we finish all senior citizens because we really need to protect them. Thereafter, it has been decided that we go, parang we can, parang diverge na. No? Ibig sabihin, the government can do the next few groups, and then the private sector can already start doing their own, and the LGUs can also start injecting. No? So that's still all assuming that we all follow the prioritization, pero it wouldn't, parang we don't need to finish like all the uniform personnel, indigent, before the private gets to, or the economic frontliner, so to speak, get to be injected, diba? So, sabay na siya. Yun. Anyway, beyond healthcare worker and beyond senior citizen, wala ka namang parang scientific reason for needing to prioritize someone else, diba? Yung first two talaga may scientific reason ka, which is to protect your health system from collapsing and to lessen the number of people who are dying, which are coming from the elderly. Thereafter, it's really a prioritization based on lack of supply. Diba? So, pwede mo na silang parallel. Now, many people ask, okay, when will I get it? So, that's the indicative part. Now, where will I get it? The question will always be coordinate with your local government. Even if your private, your vaccines are obtained by your employer, the employer will always need to work with the private, the LGU. So, bakit ganito, no? People, bakit, no? So, kunwari, if your company X with, 20 factories in the entire country, will you talk to the DOH? The answer is no, no? Unfortunately, you will just need to talk to 20 different LGUs kung separate sila. Bakit ganon? It's really because the vaccine is not a one-shot thing. Diba? you will have to be observed for a whole 1 year after you get vaccinated. In fact, after you get vaccinated, you actually need to show up on the 21st day or 28th day, depending on what vaccines you're taking. Also, before you get your first shot, you actually need to get screened. So ito nandito na nagiging importante yung may concept sa ibang countries silang primary care, di ba? I mean, in the UK, Mikel, you would know this, di ba? They really have their GP, yung someone who looks after you for a long term. Hindi to parang, gusto ko na, parang pumunta ka lang sa mall, patusok ka. Hindi siya ganon. Someone really needs to know your history and screen you. And the main reason why we need to go through the LGUs because we know that the vaccines we're using, hindi pa sila tapos sa clinical trial phase 3, diba? We're using them because of the emergency situation. It's not the typical process. Hence, there are risks. But the reason why we're using them is because the benefits outweigh the risk. That said, you need to be monitored. And it's the local health authority who will look after you, technically. So, for example, if your company intends to outsource it to an HMO, siya na yung HMO na yung magbibigay, di ba? Si HMO, kailangan pa rin niya i-coordinate yung medical records nyo dun sa city health office or municipal health office. Similar to ginawa natin sa COVID, di ba? Kahit ano mangyari, you get reported dun sa municipality. So, I think yung part na yun na coordination yung very important and sometimes difficult to get people to understand pero yun talaga wala kaming, kumbaga sa DOH side, wala po kaming kamay at paa, no? So, the hands and legs, the operational part has been devolved to the local government. So, as much as you'd like to do everything, we actually don't have the capacity to do so, no? So, we're using LGUs. And whether the LGU will decide, I don't want na to get my public system overwhelmed. I have a lot of money, so I will outsource everything to an HMO. The LGU can also do that. But they will, syempre, have to pay for it, di ba? So, depende. Gusto niya ba gamitin yung basketball court niya? Gusto ba niyang, so may standards lang, no? Na may flow, etc. Pero the LGU still has some flexibility on how to implement this.
Doc, my question dito si Dominic Solpico. Doc, what steps are made to make sure that prioritization is followed and will not be breached by anyone, especially by those with the means to breach?
Thank you for that question. Citizen participation. This isn't, yun talaga, di ba? We can make the rules, but at the end of the day, di ba, hindi mo talaga yan mababantayan, no? Completely. Marami din sa kultura natin, mahilig rin try to skirt around, no? So sa atin, I think yung sa first two segments, as what we've said, kailangan klaro sa atin na they're the ones who need it most. Hello?
Yeah, Doc, you're okay, Doc. We can hear you.
Ayun. Oo nga
Yeah. Si Ron yung may echo.
Hello?
Go ahead, Doc.
Okay.
Doc.
Ayun. So, yun. I think wala namang way out of it except for people to be very much informed and people to actively participate, diba? And call out, no? So, in fact, diba? Parang nakikita nyo ngayon, maraming nagsasabi na, sige, maybe the local chief executives, mauna silang magpabakuna, diba? Para mag-follow suit yung iba. Or, yung mga cabinet officials, mauna. Pero may consciousness rin, diba? Na, yes, maybe mileage-wise you need that. But since we're following prioritization, people are also aware. They couldn't be the first to be vaccinated kasi nagsabi nga tayo, health workers yung mauna, di ba? So now, everyone is more conscious when DOH was planning the simulation with Pasig, or everyone was saying, Mayor Vico should be first kasi, he's very sikat now, di ba? But he also recognized that, no, I'm not a frontliner, so I cannot be there, the first one, di ba? Because
bata pa siya.
oh, the first shot that he's getting is actually depriving one frontliner from the shot, diba? So I think now that people are more conscious about it, kasi diba last year dun sa mga, may mga VIP treatment, etc., diba? So dapat, I think, we call it out as citizens, no? Para hindi siya mangyari.
That's good to
Doc,
hear.
Bev, I have a question, Doc. Like from the private sector, because you mentioned like we have been asked multiple times that if we want to source vaccines for our employees. And my concern is yes, like a lot of the companies were willing to do it, but one, the issue is apparently our employees don't want the vaccine. But I also am aware that the LGU is sourcing a number of vaccines. Will there be a situation where we just brought in too much vaccines and for the people that are actually living here? Because let's say Pasig LGU brings in their vaccines, and a lot of the LGUs are saying you don't have to live there, you just have to work there, and we will vaccinate you. But then I'm also bringing in vaccines from my end. I don't know if it's all coordinated kasi baka naman mamaya may abundance ng vaccines lahat tayo nagsasayang ng pera. That's one of my concerns. Kasi I've been asked multiple occasions, and I'm a small company lang, but there are big companies that are bringing in large numbers of the vaccine also.
So yung answer natin, yung solution natin doon, operationally, will be the single database, no? Which will ensure that someone, maybe your employee, even if he will try to sign up in 3 different lists, eventually he will only be allocated one, diba? So this is also the reason why you're being asked to coordinate with the LGU, diba? Kasi if you're gonna say that if Ron is your employee, is going to be in your list, then the LGU shouldn't allocate for him or her na, diba?
That's what I'm hoping for, that there's the coordination. Because
Yes.
for now, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. No? It's just everybody's in this mad race to get the vaccine.
Mhm.
So I'm worried. Like, sana there's only 110 million people in the Philippines. So dapat alam na ni Customs, huwag tayong tumanggap ng more than 110 million doses nitong, or 200 million doses.
Kasi actually, yung naka-project na mabibili, diba, na available stocks is now only around for 70 million people, diba? So talagang may kulang pa rin, no? Tapos, kung titingnan natin, and so continues yung negotiation, diba? So, maybe for us in Manila, diba, the airwaves have been filled with good news of LCEs or LGUs buying, diba? But actually, this is, parang it's not even 10% of all LGUs. Right?
Yes.
So the usual LGUs actually cannot afford to add or to buy pa, diba? So actually, what this is gonna do, at least looking at the silver lining, is parang mas equitable siya lalabas. Kasi the richer LGUs will end up na parang ma-afford na nila yung entire population plus the private sector, diba? And so yung mga nabili ng national will likely go to some of the other LGUs. Dati kasi parang the assumption without all of these is that national will be able to secure 70% across the board, no, for all LGUs, diba? Or 50% across the board. Ngayon, kung places like Pasig, etc., Makati, diba? Mako-cover na nila more than the actual population plus yung mga nabili ng private, then the entire allocation for Pasig or Makati could actually even go out to the other far-flung areas, diba?
Doc,
And then, Doc, for the sorry, Doc, go ahead.
So you're saying that merong initiative ang some of our richer LGUs to procure the vaccine. So does this go through the national government, or they can actually directly deal with these companies, these pharma companies?
So all of these has to go through the vaccines through Secretary Galvez. But why, diba? It's really not so much that the LGUs are prohibited from dealing with the pharma. But remember, we go back to what type of permit does the vaccine have? It's an EUA, emergency use. And clearly, all the data that we're seeing is called interim data. It's not complete, no? And so, para siyang nasa manufacturing plant pa lang, pero tayo, sinabi natin, emergency, we really need to use the product. Hindi pa siya complete, di ba? Pero gagamitin na natin kasi benefits nga outweigh the risk. So kung ganon, the company will not be liable, no? Kapag may nangyari. Who will be liable? The government, di ba? So if I'm Pfizer, if I'm Moderna, why will I sell to a company? To a smaller company. I mean, there's nothing bigger than a government, di ba? Why will I sell to a company? And syempre, ako yung sisihin, di ba, afterwards. Pero this deal with government, when you're given an EUA, klaro, no, na hindi ikaw yung babalikan. Government yung nagtitake ng responsibility. And that's why the nature of the contract is tripartite. Where yung role ng private sector nun is to help finance. But the being responsible for that entire deployment is actually the government. No. So, did I answer your question,
Doc,
Ron? Yes.
Doc, like you mentioned kasi the poorer LGUs. I mean, apart from the budget issue for the poorer LGUs, my other question would be the facilities for them. Because some of these areas are far-flung. Even the cold storage facilities are very limited, no? Even sa Manila, which is a hub for everything, I know kasi some people, they've converted their mga Jollibee cold storage to be able to facilitate the vaccine. But how will we do it? How will you administer the vaccine in the poorer areas na walang ganung klaseng facility?
So, if you notice, diba, it's a portfolio of vaccines. And out of the 7 vaccines, actually 2 of them lang will need higher temperature or colder temperature. And that's just your Moderna and Pfizer, diba? And in fact, even your Pfizer, Moderna, if you have the lower, colder temperature, yung 2 to 8, pwede naman, no? It's just that pag na-thaw na sila, di mo na ulit sila pwede i-freeze, di ba? So it's not like bigla silang masisira, pero parang maging shorter lang yung parang life niya, di ba? So that said, klaro din sa atin that some of the vaccines will likely only be for areas with this capacity, no? So your Pfizer will likely be focused, no? Saan lang siya i-distribute? Like your Manila, your Cebu, your Davao, diba? But when we go to the rural areas, we will use everything else that uses 2 to 8 degrees, no? Which is your regular refrigerator, diba? At meron yun, kasi meron naman tayong long-standing vaccination program for 30 years na, no? It's the vaccination that you give to all the kids, diba? The babies, no? And that cold chain facility has been built throughout the years. It's not as expansive, pero since in tranches din naman dumadating, then nagawa na yung projections that it's actually possible. But we will not aim to bring Pfizer to our super far-flung area. Parang medyo ano na yun, we're stretching too far na.
Hindi siya feasible. Doc, meron akong interesting comment here from a guy named Ricky Danseco. Why should I rely on a trial vaccine? 4,000 COVID variants. I'd prefer hydroxychloroquine prescription than be inoculated. What's your comment on that, Doc? Kasi meron din tayong mga lumalabas na articles about that. There's an option where there's certain medication that can treat people with severe cases of COVID, and it works. So is this something that you would recommend? Obviously, we need to vaccinate, but may mga ganitong mga tao na they get their information from elsewhere other than the authorities. What's your comment on this?
So first of all, no, there's actually no proven or even good data that tells us that hydroxychloroquine is going to be protective, diba? So I think I will just leave it at that. Evidence-wise, I don't need to argue. There are claims about it, but there's really no scientific paper that says it's going to be able to match, no, what the vaccine can potentially provide you. Granted, yes, there are going to be variants, and this is the reason why, diba, may race din, no, na sinasabi. The earlier you can cover the most number of people, then that's going to be the most parang useful. Then second is, yun nga, no, vaccination is not a single person strategy. Walang point kung yung entire company ni Mikel mag-end up 10% lang gustong magpabakuna. Granted, kunwari, they're all working in one place, di ba? It will only work collectively for all of us if we are in it together. Then second is, I think we also need to, related to that, is to look at this as a community effort. We need to do vaccination, not just to protect ourselves, but also to protect some community members who are going to not be able to receive the vaccine, who cannot take on some of the treatment, etc. So we're really doing this for them then. No? So because when most of us are protected, then we can protect them.
True.
Doc,
That's Doc.
another
Sorry. Go ahead.
another concern for. Sorry, Mikel. This is also
Okay.
related to, I guess, a very important question about the vaccination, kasi is the quality of the vaccines that are being procured, and there's always there's a ongoing debate on social media as well, that some are being forced to use a vaccine that's less effective than the rest. Is there such a thing as a better vaccine given the efficacy that's being released on social media? Like, for example, there's persistent suspicion on the Chinese-made vaccine, Sinovac being 60%, having 60% efficacy. Does that have any bearing at all compared to a Pfizer or a Moderna? How should you view vaccines in terms of efficacy, if that's where the main issue or contention?
Maybe first point, no. So if you don't want to look at all the data and want to just rely on a single document, and that should just be the EUA, no. If it has been given an EUA in the Philippines, rest assured that the experts have deliberated heavily on it, no? So tinataya nila yung career nila na nag-decide sila on that. So ayaw mo nang magbasa, ayaw mo nang makinig, okay lang. Basta nabigyan nila ng EUA ng FDA, okay na siya, no. Second, another way to look at it is your baseline protection now is 0, diba? And the protection that's being afforded to you could be a 50%, 70%, 90% protection. But if you say no to probably the 60% protection, how much longer are you willing to expose yourself before you get to 90% or 100%? So if you have the luxury to be in a bubble, maybe okay to wait, diba? But not everyone has that opportunity, diba? Kasi kailangan mo magtrabaho talaga, face to pumasok sa office and stuff. So look at it as parang how can you best face daily challenges, diba? With that protection. And for many of the healthcare workers, 50 is better than 0. 70 is better than 0. Kasi kung hindi mo sure, kailan dadating yung 90, 100. Third point, marami nung nababasa niyo, doon na sa mahilig magbasa, marami sa inyo nung nagbabasa ng mga numbers, kailangan nag-level up din kayo ng binabasa niyo. No? Bakit? Kasi marami, PR war siya, di ba? So all the numbers are coming out as press releases. But out of all the numbers, ilan lang sa kanila yung may scientific journal na talagang naglabas, no, na ito na yung study. No? Bakit important na scientific journal siya? Because the editors of the journal articles are also scientists, di ba? And they really look at, okay, tama ba yung paggawa ng study, the data, no? So that said, marami kasi yung pinag-aawayan ng mga tao na numbers, press release data lang siya. No? So, di natin alam, yun ba talaga? And this is the reason why it's also taking some time then for FDA to really get all the dossier from the companies. My last point is, the vaccines have different endpoints. The 95%, 97%, 94% that we're talking about, that endpoint is the endpoint on preventing symptomatic infection, di ba? So, ito yung parang sinasabi niya, yung COVID, pag nagka-COVID ka, magiging parang halos sobrang mild na sipon na lang, di ba? Pero may dalawa pang endpoints in some of the studies, which is to make you not have severe COVID. So you will still have symptomatic COVID, but it will not get you to ICU level COVID, diba? And the last is preventing transmission, which is the most difficult to prove, no? Pero ito yung reason why, diba, after mo magbakuna, dapat naka-mask, ka pa rin. Kasi may chance pa rin na makakahawa ka, no? So yung third endpoint, yung pinakamahirap i-prove that some studies are trying to prove it. But even without that, the two outcomes that I mentioned are to make your COVID symptoms really, really mild or to avoid you getting into the ICU. You should look at these two endpoints. Because for some of the vaccines, mababa sila dun sa isa, pero to get you protected to be ICU level COVID, I think is a sufficient reason for you to take the vaccine. Diba?
100%, Doc. I mean, like, just to be able to live our lives again, no? Just to be able to go out without the fear of dying. Because there's many risks. Bear in mind, COVID is one thing that we've been scared about. There's many other diseases out there that we risk our lives every day that we can still get. So, I think everybody's just too focused on this. But the thing with vaccines is there's so much misinformation out there. Facebook alone, I think there's so many echo chambers in Facebook that just the anti-vax or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, with vaccines, there's scientific proof behind it. Kayo lang in your circles, how many people do you know that still have polio or certain things? So you know that vaccines do work. Obviously, we want to be sure what we're having, but what Doc said earlier was very true, that even if it's 50% efficacy, that's better than zero. I'll take my chances with the 50-60. That means I can go out and live my life again, work, earn money for my family, and do all sorts of stuff. No? But, the other question I have, Doc, is, 110 million is the population of the Philippines, but that includes children. So the big question here is, obviously, this is to vaccinate the adults because we're the only ones allowed. Children are not yet in that thing because they're low risk anyway. It's just that they are spreaders. But what's going to happen? What do you realistically, let's say in my household, if I get vaccinated, me and my wife get vaccinated, would it be safe then at some point for our kids to go back to school? Or is that still going to be a long shot, long time away?
Well, I think what's being really discussed now is, again, diba, it's really all weighing benefits and risks, no? So if most of the adults will actually be immunized already, then there will actually be parang impetus for us to really start opening schools. Actually, even without full vaccination, at least in areas where you have really low number of cases, diba? Kasi the negative implications of kids not being able to attend school properly is actually really high, di ba? At marami siyang spillover effects sa teenage pregnancy, sa violence at home, etc. So parang it's not as easy, and now even syempre for many of the health advocates, yun nga din, no? Very primary na health yung COVID yung concern. Pero we also, in health, sinasabi din namin na health is socially determined, di ba? Hindi nga siya nagka-COVID, pero kung hindi siya nakapag-aral for 5 years, di ba? I mean, yun. So, kailangan lang din natin talaga i-balance. So now, it's really trying to make sure that we are able to get good enough evidence to, syempre, be able to also get imprimatur from the leaders na we can actually start doing this, diba?
That's the hope, because especially for children, like you said, the mental health side is such a huge impact. Our kids have been locked up for almost a year already. And I've been very blessed because my kids, they don't really complain so much, but I can understand how difficult that is You don't get to see your friends or whatever, because really school is not so much just education, it's a social interaction. One of the main reasons we send our kids to school is not really to learn, it's the social interaction, the stuff that they learn about life and whatnot. So I think you cannot keep avoiding that. That's why I think as adults, it's our also responsibility to protect ourselves. Because by doing so, by immunizing ourselves, we are able to let the kids be kids again and live our lives. So don't be selfish. I mean, but what Doc Bev said earlier that really sticks to my mind, because even in the business world, we always think like this. The benefits outweigh the risks. In anything we do in life, there's always risk naman talaga. Pag lumabas ka ng bahay mo, there's a risk you're gonna get hit by another car or whatever it is. But, there's more things you can accomplish by going out. So with the vaccines, we have to have some faith in the medical field. They're the ones who studied this, di ba? Ang mahirap sa atin, lahat tayo, armchair commentator, nakabasa lang tayo ng isang Huffington Post article, feeling natin we can give all this advice. And there's a reason Doc Edsel is Doc Edsel. There's a reason Doc Bev is Doc Bev. They went to school to study this. Okay, so I don't think they will sign this off just so that to get us off their backs, diba? We have to have some faith in this. It's gotten us this far. Medicine has, when you're sick, you go to the hospital. You don't go to Facebook and look at all the conspiracy theories. So I think my advice to the viewers here is, we have to have some faith in the medical field. And then also the other thing is, by our cases are relatively under control for now. 1,000 something. The hope is more and more people get the immunizations, and that will keep going lower. And at some point, mawawala din yan. Like other countries, they hardly have any. But also, wag lang tayo umasa just sa vaccine. Some people, kasi, okay lang, parating na yung vaccine, party na, diba? Doon ako nababaliw. Pag gusto ko sampalin yung mga yun. Pero everybody else, if you have to go to work, all that, I respect those people. It's those people who are having big social gatherings, wala man lang mask, right? Doon ako nababaliw. Wala akong pasensya for those people.
Doc, ang dami nating comments dito. No? Merong isang comment dito coming from Hal Flores. Emergency use authorization after phase 3 trials means phase 4 ito sa regular na paraan ng approval. Hindi maiwasan na mabahala ang karamihan. So there's concern that na medyo minamadali daw natin itong proseso. At siguro ang question ko, Doc, ano yung risk? Kung merong mga risk of medyo napabilis yung proseso of having a vaccine approved, ano yung mga inherent risks that the government will have to take on because of the emergency that we of having the vaccine being used right away?
Okay, so I guess I need to clarify that, no? So yung phase 3 trial po, typically around 30 to 60,000 individuals yung kailangan matapos, no? So most of the studies have completed their 30,000, di ba? And some even more. I think the main difference is time element. Sometimes information is revealed to us because of the length of time that's available for observation. Ngayon, kapag tinanong natin, how long yung protective effect ng vaccines? Ang kaya mo lang isagot is the number of months that the trial is ongoing, di ba? Hindi ko sa'yo kayang sabihin na 5 years protection kasi hindi ko naman na-follow up yung mga pasyente ng trial for 5 years eh. Kasi last year lang nag-umpisa siya, di ba? So wala ka nung benefit of a longer follow-up, di ba? And that's where the risk could possibly come from. Typically, when a drug or a vaccine is produced, the length of follow-up allows you both short-term and long-term side effects or adverse events, di ba? Kaya mo siyang ilista, di ba? And that allows you to parang put more and more contraindications, no? Sino yung mga hindi pwedeng kumuha ng vaccine? Kasi, kung nares, 60,000 ka na tao, malamang meron doon subset na buntis. Yung, kaya mo mag-subset analysis. Ngayon, imposible siya, no? Kasi marami sa kanila, hindi pa nila tapos yung 60,000, di ba? So, that said, hindi ka maka-subset analysis ng tama, ng maraming-marami, iba-iba, hindi ka rin makapag long-term, no? Ano yung long-term effects? Which yun yung typically nagagawa mo for a regular product that siguro was in phase 3 for, usually kasi yung recruitment ang tagal din. So the phase 3 usually lasts, 3-4 years? in a regular time, no? Kasi naghanap pa talaga sila ng taong gustong sumali. Ito parang maraming nag-volunteer din. So, yun yung mga risk, no? Meron kang possibly yung 1 per 1 million mo na pwedeng magkasakit, ma-hospitalize, mamatay. Yun yung hindi pa sobrang clear sa atin, di ba? Pero, rest assured that sa phase 1 at sa phase 2 ng trials, na-establish na dapat yung safety. Ibig sabihin, yung overall safety niya, established. Kasi kung kakamatay mo siya, hindi na siya dapat nag-proceed from phase 1 to phase 2. No? So yun naman yung assurance. It's really just the other effects that the drug or the vaccine might have.
May mga ano kasi, Doc, paminsan may mga lumalabas na anecdotal comments. Most of the time sa social media, merong magpo-post, i-share yung post ng isang, let's say, relative daw ng 72-year-old na that was at a certain point was healthy. Bigla nung na-vaccinate daw, biglang nagkasakit at namatay. So itong mga tao na to, pag nababasa nila yan, delikado pala magpa-vaccine, hindi pala tayo sigurado kung effective siya. Yun yung mga paminsan yung ating challenges na hinaharap natin, because people tend to share stuff that are a little bit sensationalized, or hindi
baka we can just ban Facebook na lang muna while we roll out the panira lang to. Kasi pampagulo lang we all get this fake news. But Doc, just update from the surveys that we did and from talking to people, one of the most common reasons given for the doubts on the vaccine is actually, na-mention, is the dengue vaccine, the Dengvaxia, whatever. That's been brought up to us a lot of times, actually. So I think maybe that's also an opportunity for the DOH to, I'm sure you've already done a lot of information to shed some light, but I think it's still fresh in the mind of some of the people. Kasi I've seen that in the survey answers a few times.
Oo, marami pang nagpe-peddle ng bad info. I mean, Dengvaxia is still being used in other countries, right? And then, kung titingnan nyo, yung Dengvaxia natapos niya yung phase 3 trial niya, diba? Actually, nasa phase 4 siya when it was being introduced here. No? So, parang dapat klaro rin sa atin, no? At which point it's actually a scientific debate, at which point it was actually a political debate, diba? I think I'll just leave it at that. But let's just really be more mindful about what we read. I completely agree with you, Mikel.
Doc,
there's just too much misinfo out there. The Facebook. May isa pa nga, Doc, yung katulong helper ng isa kong friend. Ayaw magpa-swab test kasi daw, linalagay daw ng WHO yung COVID dun sa swab test. Gusto silang magka-COVID para mabawasan daw yung population. Kasi there's all these kinds of, it's like, I would laugh, but it's just so scary that there's so, if it was just an isolated issue, then fine. But I come across all sorts of misinformation everywhere. And it's just that we live in a golden age of information with the internet, but there's so much bad information there. If you go down the wrong way, you lose all this stuff. That's why I implore everybody, please, let's listen to the experts. There's always going to be a risk and everything. There's risk everywhere. Every time you take a biogesic or anything, there's a risk to that. That's why it tells you all the side effects. Kung manood kayo ng isang commercial sa US about a medicine, my God, ang ganda-ganda ng commercial ng video. Then the next 2 minutes of that commercial is telling you all the possible side effects that are there, But, it's just that this is something so crucial and so important in our lives that we need to listen to the experts. No one else. I don't think there's a conspiracy among all the doctors for us all to die from side effects, diba? It doesn't make sense. Kaya kailangan natin ng common sense. It's just that,
actually,
naawa ko lang, Doc, kasi, for so long, minamadali natin, nasan yung vaccine? Ngayon, nandito na yung vaccine. Uy, bilis naman masyado yan, di ba? Saan kayo lulugar, di ba? Hindi ko na alam.
At saka parang tumatawid kayo ng kalsada, nagko-commute kayo. Kahit nagda-drive ka, there's always a risk, no? Kahit sobrang galing mong driver, meron. So you're putting yourself at risk every day, actually. And so it's all about calculating, no? Pero yung benefit of you going to work, benefit of you eating in a good restaurant, etc., yun naman yung wini-weigh mo, di ba? So kaya ka pa rin nagda-drive.
In the same way, we're all scared. We all know that our phones are being used to spy on us or whatever, dahil mga fear. But we all still get the Apple, the nicest phone, kahit na feeling natin it's so bad, diba? But we still do it, diba? Because the benefits outweigh the risk, like Doc Bev says. But this time, it's with the vaccine, it's so critically important, because we have to go back to living our lives. There's so many people out of work. There's so many people going through mental health issues because of this lockdown and this pandemic. It's a global thing. But sana kung dito lang sa Philippines, force atin mag-vaccine and everybody else ayaw, di ba? Doon magtataka ka talaga, di ba? Baka, alam mo naman dito, o baka makikita na naman ng politiko dito or whatever. But this is scientifically backed. And we really need to get better information out there to help people. All I want naman is for people, like even sa company ko, I cannot force, kasi people say, pilitin mo na, if they don't get the vaccine, they can't work. That's ridiculous. You can't do that. Madole pa ako ng oras. But it's really, I just want people to have better information in order to decide for themselves.
Doc, speaking of information, I wanted to ask you earlier nga kasi people tend to gravitate towards sensationalized post, and then they believing that, and they share it with their friends. If you were to give advice to people who are because this is a very important issue, this is a very important point in our history that we really need, as part of the advocacy of the DOH talaga, is we need to make sure that we share the right information, di ba? Sa bida, the bida campaign yan, alamin ang totoong impormasyon. Doc Bebs, anong suggestion mo sa ating mga viewers? How would they know if what they're reading is the right information on social media?
I think first of all, we go to legitimate sources, di ba? And oftentimes, written legitimate sources will actually let you know na tama, no? Kasi minsan, kung expert, personal opinion, hindi mo na rin ma-differentiate, di ba? Kung personal opinion ba yun ng isang doktor, etc., or talagang yun yung true information. So, if you have the resources, and if you have been blessed to have good enough education to read, then please use that, no? Use platforms na verified. So, syempre, DOH, we have platforms where you can find out, you can get the information. And then sa CBC, diba? The premier websites, no? Then some of our partners like Philippine Society of for Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. So, yun yung mga tama, diba? Meron kang sure na mababasa, guideline ba yan, etc. At least sa atin, sa DOH, we do like debunking of some of the fake news in our social media channels. Then, kung walang ganong mechanism, the only way to do it is really be able to verify the information. And it is ideal that you verify your information from your licensed healthcare provider. People who, as Mikel said, spent a whole chunk of their lives studying, certain things, not just because it was pandemic, but because it's really their life's work, diba? So, exactly. I think yun naman.
But Doc, tama ka dyan, no? Because like if you get any information, my best advice, like I always do, because people send me WhatsApp links all of the time. I send it to my doctor. I say, what do you think? And then he gives me a nice educated response, and then I can tell my friends, okay, ganyan. But wag yung pagdating sa'yo, share mo kagad, whatever, kalat ka na ng information. Kasi medyo delik sa mga ganyan. No? So everybody has doctor friends that they can talk to or access to healthcare. Most companies also, they give health insurance and stuff. So you have access to doctors that you can talk to. I also suggest like the DOH has a Viber group page that I'm part of. I get a lot of my statistics and data from there. Instead of all these useless Viber groups, let's get some information from those kinds of people. But there really is information out there that is valid and validated, and it's good. Doon tayo pumunta. Wag lang porket link dyan na galing sa kaibigan mo, okay na kagad.
Doc, artistahin ka pala, Doc. Sabi ni Michael Sapico, hawig mo daw si Kim Chu. Grabe. Hanapin natin si Michael. Mas maganda naman si Doc Bev dyan, ano ba?
So talino pa. But yeah, so are there any other questions there, Ron, that we can ask, you know?
Yeah, actually may mga comments dito.
But baka Doc Bev has to go already. Kawawa naman, it's been already.
Mga
I'm sure
Doc, alam
she's
ko
very,
you're
very
very
tired,
busy
very tired.
naman. Marami kang, it's been hard for you to schedule interviews like this, but you were able to find time for us. Probably, I have one comment though. Meron ano sa akin kasi may nagpadala sa akin ng message kanina regarding, I don't know if this is if you've heard of such complaints from people who had loved ones who passed away, and then for only for the hospital, for example, to declare them as a COVID case. Meron bang current, wala akong alam dito Doc kung meron itong policy sa mga hospitals ngayon to declare deaths as COVID cases so they can get compensation. Meron bang mga ganyang kalokohan nangyayari, Doc Bebs? Kasi may narinig ako mga kwentong ganyan na even if the death was a different cause, it was an accident or uh, sabihin i-declare ng hospital na COVID. Meron ba silang incentive for them to do that? For them to actually deliberately change the cause of death?
But then they also need to really have the RT-PCR done and said, so parang wala namang way dapat na madadaya mo to, no? So I really don't know like where this is coming from.
Okay. So yung pag namatay yung pasyente, kasi di ba paminsan dinidiretso nilang kinikremate yung body kagad kasi hindi nila pwedeng galawin or i-test. Is that kumbaga does that become a way for them to sort of like manipulate the process and then so increase the number of cases even though these people didn't die of COVID?
It's very difficult to speculate, Ron. Yeah, I think ano lang, there's just so much that has happened over the past year. I think if we are to remind everyone is that we have personal, we have social, or we have like earthly responsibility, diba, in this world. Like no amount of enforcement can work when everyone just wants to take advantage of other people.
Right.
Especially in this case na very sensitive, no? Parang, can you imagine if you declare someone na COVID siya, automatic cremate you na within the next 12 hours. And that means the family of that person will really be robbed of the opportunity to grieve properly, diba? So, sana hindi totoo. Pero ang hirap lang din na parang kung every single dadaanin natin sa may, di ba, sobrang toxic na nung rules. Kasi, ewan ko, yun. It's difficult.
I've been hearing about it, but I told them that I'm going to ask you about it if you're aware of such modus.
Pag gano'n na lang, go to hell na lang yung hype na gumawa niyan. Karma is a bitch. Karma will come and get you. Grabe. We need to, we need to really look after each other. Like Doc Bev said, we all have responsibilities in this life. Huwag naman tayo magaguhan. People who find ways to make money from these kinds of situations, there really is a special place in hell for you. But the thing is, I will say most people are good. Most people follow the rules, and we have to just focus on those ones. There will always be people who will try to bend the rules and make money, but let's look at the good side and not sensationalize the evil. Grabe.
Finally, Doc, for your quotable quote from Doc Bebs, because the main point of our conversation tonight is really about vaccines to sort of debunk all the different opinion about it, na negative. How would you sort of like try to convince, or what's your last message to our viewers so that it can make them more confident in our vaccination program or what the government is doing? What is happening, and what do you think? What do you think they should look forward to in this vaccination program of the government?
I think we also need to recognize that the vaccine will not be a silver bullet, but it will provide a very important layer of protection, additional layer of protection for many of us to resume or even come close to resuming our pre-pandemic life, no? And we need to do this not just because of everyone's health, but because we need to ensure that more Filipinos continue to have jobs and more Filipinos will be able to go to school again. Diba? Kasi this is not a one-year thing that we're talking about. The implications of this running for a far longer period of time has drastic consequences for the future of our country. No? So parang seryosohin natin to. Hindi to case bulletin issue lang. Hindi tayo nagna-numbers game lang dito. Parang buhay at future ng mga kabataan yung naka-rely, no? Dito sa parang steps natin in the vaccination program. So, we hope that everyone is gonna come on board and trust the process. Trust the experts and trust the process. We want to make sure that everyone is healthy. After all, kung kami din yung mag-alaga sa inyo, ayaw naman namin na lahat kayo mapunta din sa ospital, di ba? Parang that's so counterintuitive. So, yun lang. Trust the system, trust the process, and trust the experts. We want to make this good for everyone.
Doc, relative to other countries, Doc, how are we doing, in your honest opinion,
In terms of COVID?
dealing with COVID-19?
It's difficult to buhat your own bangko, di ba? But I would say that it's a team effort. Hindi naman din natin pwede sabihin sino lang, gobyerno lang ba to, tao lang. I think we've learned our lessons. Filipinos we've adapted. And so if you look at the rankings now, we're fairly in a good position for the level of income that we have, diba? And that's going to be attributed not just to technology, hindi to dahil marami tayong testing, etc., but really because people cooperated.
Finally, Doc, two things pala. One is, are antigen test accurate? Because I know of some people who use antigen test where they get the results in 15 minutes. Are those dependable? You
The
think?
evidence is antigen tests are better when you have symptoms. So their predictive value increases significantly when they're used on people with symptoms. But when they're used on people without symptoms, then it's not as sensitive.
Okay. And Doc, the last question, medyo related to football. Why aren't we allowed to play football pickup games yet?
I think it's contact sport, no?
So there are really the chances of you getting COVID is high when you do contact sports like football and basketball.
Well, that's also the reason why even in pretty progressive countries, diba, they're in a bubble.
Okay.
So, as long as you're in a bubble game, diba? Pero kung hindi, yun.
Doc, a little compliment for you from Lorimer Aredaha. Yes, agreed. Beauty and brains, si Doc Bev. Thank you so much, Doc Bev. Best of the best. So, Doc, with that, we're hoping that you can come again and join us on Istoryang Futbolero. It's been a very illuminating episode with you. Si Mikel nawala sa stream, but he's back. We really enjoyed our conversation with you, Doc. It's been very informative. We really needed that kasi we've been, for the past months or so, since the last time we spoke to you, medyo paiba-iba yung opinion ng mga tao about vaccination, about COVID-19. Ngayon that we actually had the privilege of having you on the show, medyo naging mas maliwanag yung aming pananaw towards the pandemic and more importantly, vaccination. Mikael, you have any final words to say before we go?
Sorry not nagka-technical difficulties. But yeah, thank you so much, Doc Bev. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to have you here. There's so many comments, even from my friends, na they really learned so much tonight. Na kasi you have a really good way of communicating, Doc. We really need more people like you because you explain it in such good ways. Sana lang we find ways to amplify that even more so that it gets to more corners. Because so many people need to know about these vaccines and COVID, and I think information goes a long way. And sometimes kasi people have good information, but they don't know how to explain it to the average person. And Doc Bev, I think you do that very, very well. It's very hard to argue with anything you said tonight. We're very, very happy. And to everybody watching, my advice, like I said, kanina, is educate yourself. Use the right information. Madaming avenues dyan. It's very, very important. So many people are out of work. Kami mga business owners, sobrang hirap na. Hirap na talaga kami. So as in, if we can do all that we can to get back to normal, it's very important. Kasi mahirap na walang trabaho. Kids can't go to school. Our lives have been changed, and we're being given avenues to get back to the old way. So let's do it. Yung mga takot dyan, may mga nabasa ko kanina na takot magkaroon ng microchip daw yung vaccine. Yung phone mo nga, alam ko lahat ng location mo, lahat ng website na pinupuntahan mo, lahat ng ginagawa mo. Hindi ka naman kinakabahan.
QAnon ba yan? Yung ano na yan? Yung...
No, it's... I have people who really genuinely believe that there are microchips in these vaccines. But anyway, chicken nuggets na kinakain mo, hindi mo alam kung anong parts ng chicken na nalagay sa chicken nuggets. But anyway, so let's just all do our part. And again, thank you so much, Doc Bev, and to everybody out there. Even if there's a vaccine coming, please continue to follow the protocols. Please be safe. Sobrang dami ng big gatherings dyan, mga social, ganyan. Please, we're not saying lock yourselves in your house, but follow the protocols. Wear the masks. And use the test properly. Okay, yung mga nagko-comment dyan na nagpa-test naman kami lahat. Oh my gosh. Don't me. Okay, so anyway, yun lang. Thanks, Doc.
Thank
so
you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Good
Doc,
night.
Mag-celebrate ba daw ng Valentine's Day? Yung mga couple.
Huwag na. Usually, Ron, dun sa office namin sa Pasig kasi Ron, malapit yung office ko sa Victoria. Sa mga motels dun sa Pasig. Normally, pag Valentine's, di ako pumapasok. Sobrang traffic dyan yung mga taxi. Ngayon, mga bakante sila this year.
Quarantine facility na sila.
Anyways, be safe, guys. Thanks again, Doc, for your time today. I know you're super busy and tired.
Thank you so much. To all the viewers, so sila Marivic, sila Michael, sila Edwin. Doc Bebs, we usually end our program by mentioning the BIDA reminders. So we want to give you the honors of actually reminding people of what they need to remember. Hindi pa po tapos yung pandemic. Doc Bebs, please tell them what BIDA stands for.
B, bawal walang mask, and now with face shield. I, isanitize yung mga kamay, but also iwasan yung mga kulob na lugar. We updated it. And D, dumistansya ng 1 metro, and syempre avoid yung mga crowded areas. A, alamin ang totoong impormasyon, as Ron has mentioned. And then now we added a plus, no, which is supportahan ang FDA-approved na bakuna. That's
Yun.
Yeah. Bida Plus na pala, hindi na ako updated.
Grabe, Doc. As in, for almost a year, parati namin sinasabi yung BIDA reminders when we end the program.
Thank you.
Finally, we have you personally to say it to everyone.
All right. Thanks a lot. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Good night,
Doc.
everyone. Thank you very much. Bye.